Good morning. A very warm welcome to week 4 of Financial Fitness Fridays. I'm your host, I'm Darren Laverty. I work for Second Sight, which is part of the Foster de Novo group. And today the topic of the moment is understanding the property market. This is really down to you guys because what we do is we ask you to give us feedback at the end, and we're going to do the same again today. So when this session finishes, you'll be taken straight to a 1-minute feedback survey. Just tell us what you think, what works for you, what doesn't work. Tell us what else you want to learn about, and we'll listen to your thoughts and we'll fine tune this going forward. Some of you have already mentioned that there's no backdrop today. I normally have a Financial Fitness Fridays backdrop. I haven't got that because I'm actually on holiday, but obviously I'm committed to you guys. I'm in sunny Cornwall today going through this process, so I'm in a friend of mine's study. There's some good internet here, so we should be good to go. So I have a wonderful guest today, the lovely Augusta. She's an award-winning property investment advisor. We've got a lot of good questions for her. Now, I'm not exactly sure how long it's going to take today. We tend to aim for about half an hour and then end it, because I know some of you block the half hour out, and then you go off to other meetings. What we'll do, we'll end it at the half-hour stage if we are still going by that point, and then people are free to go, and then we'll make it a free-for-all in terms of questions and answers. So have your questions ready, and then what we'll do, if those questions are useful for the rest of the audience to hear about, then we'll ask those questions, and the lovely Augusta can tell us the answers. So for those of you that don't know about this, this is your first session. This is really an idea based on the Joe Wicks concept, where he gets everybody fit. So we decided to try to get everybody financially fit. So Financial Fitness Fridays is really all about financial well-being. And what is financial well-being? Well, if you don't have any stress financially, then that's not a bad place to be. If you feel in control, then you don't have any stress, that's where we want to be. And sometimes just learning some more information is really important, and just learning small pieces of information can actually avoid us feeling stress or put us more in control, because we're in control of our thinking. 80% of any success in life is psychology. It's the mindset. So whilst you can learn loads of stuff about finance, it's all on the internet. You can go and get it on Google. But at the end of the day, when you don't know what it is you want and you don't know why you want it, it's no good. We need both things. We need to know what you want. We need to know why you want it. And then what we do is we then combine that with strategy. And that is how we achieve financial well-being and make sure that you always feel in control. Now, it's a moving feast, so we have to keep on learning all the time. So when your why is big enough, there's nothing stopping you. When your why is big enough, you can go and find your own answers. You can Google it and go and get those answers. So we're going to try and give you some of that content, but also want to try and give you some of that thinking as well. So the lovely Augusta is going to help us to understand this particular subject today. This was your chosen topic. We're going to talk a bit about first-time buyers and the schemes that help first-time buyers get on the market. We're going to talk about lifetime ISAs, which can help with getting deposits together. We're going to talk about interest rates. We're going to talk about we should fix rates or not. Is that good for financial well-being? People are always asking, should I invest in property or should I invest in a pension? And then we're going to talk about the first thing you could do if you wanted to start off in the property investment market. What's the most important next step you might want to take? So without further ado, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce Augusta. Augusta, are you out there? Hey, you need to turn your microphone on.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, good morning. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Darren. How are you?
Yeah, well, thanks for taking the time out to help us today. Really, really appreciate it. So what's this award you won then a little while ago?
I won a Mortgage Advisor of the Year at the Financial Reporter Women Awards.
Oh, congratulations.
Well, very much. Women in Finance. Yeah.
So, well, thanks ever so much for jumping on today. I do have a bunch of questions I'm going to go through that we think the questions that people want to hear about. And then if it's okay with you, Augusta, when we've finished those pieces off, then what we'll do is we will let people go if they've got to go on. But if you are happy to hang on for 10 minutes afterwards for questions from the audience, that'd be absolutely brilliant. And the other thing I will also ask the audience at the end is, do they want a bit more of you? So today it might not be enough for some people. If they would like another, phase 2, then we'll ask those questions at the end. So let's get going. So the first thing is then, Augusta, a lot of first-time buyers out there are finding it very hard. Obviously, house prices are astronomical now. And so big deposits are required. So, and young people are starting, life out. A lot of them are starting life out with student debt, so that's affecting their income. So, what are the schemes out there? There are schemes out there. So, in plain English, what are the schemes out there that can help first-time buyers get into the market?
Okay, well, look, there are a number of schemes available, but I probably think the two that we should focus on today are going to be relevant is shared ownership and the Help to Buy schemes. Okay. Now, if you compare shared ownership to the Help to Buy schemes, if you were just coming along, you decided to buy a house, ordinarily pre-COVID, we were looking at 10% deposit. Now, post-COVID, the market's a lot more conservative, so you'd be looking to put down a 15% deposit. These schemes alleviate the pressure of putting down such a large deposit. So the one thing that these two schemes have in common is the potential for you to only put down a 5% deposit. Okay.
So that's on both schemes, so shared ownership and Help to Buy.
Yes, yes. In fact, I mean, shared ownership is a lot more varied than that. Some housing associations will allow 0% deposit, the same with some lenders, some 5%, some 10%. But yes, they both have in common that on average, you're only required to put down, say, a 5% deposit on both the schemes. Okay.
So, Augusta, so if I was looking for a shared ownership property, where would I look to go and find these properties?
Okay, so look, not every house you're going to find in the market is available for shared ownership. There are specific organizations called housing associations that offer these types of properties, and they can be found all around, well, definitely England, and I guess other certain parts of the UK as well.
Okay, so basically Google a housing association website. Is there like a hub of these housing associations?
Not that I know about. I don't think there's a universal hub. I think the thing to start off with is the areas that you're interested in. So whichever area you're interested in looking at, it's very good to, have a look at the housing association that's available in that area, register with the housing association, and then they'll contact you to gather more information and to provide you with viewings.
Brilliant. Okay, so tell me then about the Help to Buy schemes.
Okay, so Help to Buy, there are two types of Help to Buy available in the UK at the moment. The first is your standard Help to Buy, and the breakdown of that is a 5% deposit. This is all, of course, all subject to affordability. So your 5% deposit, then you have got a 20% government loan. So this is a very good illustration. I think this really shows, how it would work on a £400,000 property. So you've got your 5% deposit at the top, you've got your 20% equity loan, and then you have, this is an example of the London Help to Buy, which is a little bit different to the standard Help to Buy. So with the London Help to Buy, the government loan is 40%, whereas in your standard, it's around 20%. And the same with the mortgage requirement. On your London Help to Buy, the mortgage requirement is about 55%, whereas in your standard, it's about 75% loan to value. So on the day that you're getting your mortgage, the lender wants to be satisfied that you can afford the mortgage. But as the people who you are getting the property from, so the developer and the Help to Buy organization to support it, they will want to ensure that actually you're able to afford this whole loan. Because although that government loan is interest-free for the first 5 years, if you haven't repaid or sold the property, you will be expected to pay a nominal interest towards that government loan at the end of the period.
So in a nutshell then, what we're saying here is that, in this example, we've got a home in London with the London Help to Buy scheme is 40% of the government loan.
Yes.
So therefore, young people would only be required to get a small deposit of 5%. And also, if they haven't got enough income yet, then they're only having to have enough income to show they can afford a 55% mortgage rather than a 95% mortgage.
Exactly.
So it helps them on the deposit and on the borrowing. That's absolutely brilliant. And then these schemes are different outside of London and then in Scotland, is that right?
Yeah, so I won't talk too much about Scotland. I don't know how many people are in Scotland at the moment. It's a little bit more complicated. The whole system of buying homes is different in Scotland anyway. So I'll just focus on England and Wales at the moment. Yeah, so, obviously you've got your London Help to Buy, which functions a bit differently because London's so expensive. And again, where does London start? Where does London end? That's very difficult. That's usually depending on the developer and their ability to get this, passed with the government as to whether it fits in London or not. You have to be quite careful. You can't just assume you have access to London Help to Buy, which might not. Yeah.
Now, I'm getting quite a few questions come through, and they are quite good questions. What I'll do, I'm going to save them all up. Let's get through the content for now, and then we'll come back to them. So thanks for your questions so far, everybody. Okay, so The other thing then is there's some other support for young people, especially trying to get on the property ladder to try and help build up a deposit quicker. The lifetime ISA. And my understanding is a lifetime ISA, you get like a 25% bonus as a tax relief, a bit like a pension, but it's into an ISA, which is an individual savings account, grows tax free. But when it's a deposit for a house, you probably wouldn't really have it invested. It'd probably be cash. But the bottom line is you're getting this government money. Have you come across this very often? Are these a good thing? Are they useful for people to get them going?
Well, I think it's always going to depend on your circumstances, whether it's useful or not. But what I will do today is just kind of give you maybe 5 or 6 key points that you probably need to think about with regards to whether you're going to, apply for a LISA or not. Now, the first thing to bear in mind is that, if you are going for a LISA and, you start saving and then you decide, actually, I'm going to pull out at some point, there might be a penalty. So you have to be aware that, if you're not committed to saving, it might detrimentally impact you. So that's one thing that's important. But on a more positive note, first things first, the LISAs can either come, as with general ISAs, either with cash or with stocks and shares. Now, if you're saving for a house, obviously it makes sense to potentially look at cash ISA as opposed to a stocks and shares ISA. So there's a differentiation there. The next thing you need to think about is your timescales. So you need to be saving for at least 12 months in order for the government to give you that 25% bonus that they promise. There's also a maximum annual saving of £4,000 per person. So if you're a couple, that obviously doubles up to £8,000. And then if there's a 25% bonus on top of that, it's up to £1,000. So, you save 4, potentially you have £5,000. Same with a couple, £8,000, and you save together £10,000 through this scheme. The other thing to bear in mind, it's a little bit age discriminatory. You have to set it up before your 40th birthday, unfortunately.
Too late for me there.
Exactly. And then another question that has come up is, how do you get this money? So just to make sure that the money will be used for what it's expected to, especially when your LISA is for you to purchase a property, the money comes in through your conveyancer, who is your property lawyer. So at the point of completion, your conveyancer will then go apply for that money to be withdrawn. So just make sure they leave enough time so that you're not sat there waiting for weeks between exchange and completion for that money to come through.
That's really good advice, actually. Thanks ever so much. There is a question that's come up, which I think it's worth just going back on, because I just want to make sure that people are clear on this. So on the government loan on a Help to Buy scheme, the question is, when do you start paying it back? So I think it's just a misunderstanding.
5 years. It's interest-free for 5 years.
Interest-free 5 years.
Interest-free 5 years. When do you start paying it back? To be honest, because it's interest-free, you can start paying it back at any point. That is definitely a conversation you have with the equity loan provider, as to when that can happen. But it's interest-free for 5 years. After the 5 years, interest is then payable on that loan.
And then if you sell the house, then if it was a 40% loan from the government, you'd then pay them back 40% of the sale price of the house.
Exactly. So if they've given you a 40% equity loan, and then you sell the property, you will repay back the loan, the principal, but you will also repay back the uplift. So if your house has gone up, whatever the 40% equivalent is, you have to repay that amount as well.
Right. I suspected. So we do have millions of questions. So we will be running over. So we will end at the half-hour stage, but we will run over. And everyone's got such a unique perspective on this and got their own personal situation. So we'll just want to make sure we do cover off some of the points so everybody benefits from the session today. So we've got very low interest rates at the moment. The Bank of England base rate's down to 0.1%, the lowest it's ever been. And, it seems bizarre. I mean, when I first bought a property back in the very late 80s, my interest rate was 15%. Can you imagine that? 15% compared to the base rates today. And so the question that does bring to people is, obviously, should I fix my interest rate or not? Now, a fixed rate will be a bit higher than a tracker, or a variable rate. But the question is, should I fix my rate or not? What would you say to that, Augusta?
First of all, I just find it so interesting, this whole 15% interest rate, because that is a bridging loan today. That is a very expensive product in the market.
Augusta, I don't think you were even born then, were you?
I don't think I knew anything about anything. But back to the question about whether I should fix. Look, I am asked this question so much, and I've been asked this question several times over the last few years. And I think the most important, because like 5 years ago, when interest rates were at 0.5%, we were like, oh, how low? We can't go any lower than that, And now we're at 0.1. So it's a crazy world. No idea what it's going to do. what's going to happen next. I think the important thing when you're deciding whether or not you should fix your product is your personal circumstances. Now, if you have found a lovely house and you're happy and you're settled and you plan to be there for the next 5 years undisturbed, and you want to start to plan your finances, put money away for your pension, there is nothing wrong with fixing your property, fixing your mortgage for 5 years. That's great. However, if in 2 or 3 years' time you might want to upgrade, remortgage the property into a buy-to-let, move countries, there's no point fixing for 5 years, because then you'll be subject to an early repayment charge. So I think the conversation really is more, well, where do I want to be in the next few years, as opposed to what's going to happen in the world. That whole crystal ball game just doesn't play out well for people. So I think that's what your decision should be based on.
That's brilliant. Okay, I look at it from another perspective. Well, I think that from a financial well-being perspective, to have good financial well-being, we need to be in control, or feel that we're in control of most things financial. And if we're not, if we have a variable interest rate, it might be slightly lower and it might be slightly cheaper today, but at point one, I don't think it can go any lower. Literally now, there's only one way it's going to go, and it's somebody else controlling my finances. And I think that for me is a big one. So if we know, we've got absolute certainty, maybe for 5 years, that we've got a fixed amount, nothing can change that, whatever happens, I can then budget, I can then plan. And I think that's really good for financial well-being. And financial well-being, a big part of that is to make sure that we are making positive progress, whether we are trying to get out of debt today, or we're starting on our financial well-being journey, or we're starting on our savings journey. We need to have future-focused objectives and a place we want to be in the future, and then have a plan to achieve that. And the more control we have over that plan, I think the better. So I think from that perspective, when you know that you're in control of your monthly outgoings, then I think that's really powerful for financial well-being. And it allows you to do some proper budgeting, when it's something we've talked about on previous Financial Fitness Fridays. So thanks very much for that, Augusta. I always look at it from that financial well-being perspective, obviously, because that's kind of what I do. I've got another question here for you, which is a big question, which I've heard this so many times. And I know I've had people's attitudes towards pensions change a lot over the years, their retirement planning through pensions. And I've had a lot of people over the years saying, my property is my pension. I would rather invest in property than in a pension. Now, I want to ask your opinion about that in a moment, but one thing I want to remind people of, and I say this all the time as well, is that most people on this show today, are employed, and if they're employed, they get given a pension scheme from work. And usually the arrangement there, in the main, not all of them, but generally what happens is if you pay money in, your employer pays money in, and you get tax relief. So it's a really good savings scheme. For most people, they're more than doubling their money effectively. So that doesn't happen if you invest that money in property. Your employer does not pay the money into the property, and you don't get the tax relief on the contribution. So just want to put that one out there to remind people, it's not just investment compared to investment, it's actually how you get the money into it and where that money comes from. So there's a lot more to think about. But if it is just literally on property or pensions, what's best? Can I ask you, Augusta, you must have come across this all the time, and you must be dealing with people that have made that decision that property investment is where they want to go. So what's your thoughts around that particular concept?
Okay, so I genuinely do not think it's either or. I don't think it's right. I'm going to throw all my money into property, or I'm going to throw all my money into, pension. I think that there is a conversation to be had, and, a relationship with a very good financial advisor will help you to plan for your personal circumstances. What I will say that over the last 10 years, especially over the last 2 or 3, there has been a steady commercialization of property. And what I mean by that is, 10, 12, 15 years ago, 100% mortgages, everyone was buying houses, it was so easy to get on the ladder, the tax was just all over the place with it, you could earn so much money, turn over tons, expense the world away, pay a tiny bit of tax, and people were like, yeah, look, at the end of the day, I don't even mind if I'm making a bit of a loss on a property, I'm just going to buy it and it's going to form part of my pension. And then something significant happened, particularly in 2017, something called Section 24 came into the market. And
you broke up there, the sound. What came in about in 2017?
Something widely known in the market as Section 24, which, right, just to summarize, I'm not going to go into massive details about it, I'm not an accountant, but what it did was impact the way that property income was taxed when the asset is held in your individual name. And it becomes more expensive to hold property when it's held in your individual name. So without getting into lots of detail, what I would say is that if you're serious about property and you want to, think about growing property, you have to think of it as a business. It's not just an investment. You have to treat it as a business. You have to be quite serious about it. You have to be quite strategic in a way that you didn't have to be 10, 12 years ago. So I think it's very different.
Yeah, 'cause I remember years ago, you could jump into a taxi and the taxi driver might have had 6 or 7 houses, because he just used to save up lots of 5% deposits and then get a buy to let.
Or even 0% deposits. There was a time it was 100% mortgages, 120% mortgages. All you had to worry about was, and then the other thing, you could buy a house for £100,000. The week after, it was worth £120,000. You refinance, pull out your 20 grand and go again. It doesn't work like that anymore.
Right.
So far from that.
Can I just clarify? So I think Section 24, the big impact there then was that over time, the government have disallowed the mortgage on your buy-to-let mortgage, the interest you pay, they disallowed that being an expense on that running that property as a business. So that now is not an allowable business expense within the accounts of that buy-to-let property. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I mean, the swiftest way to look at this is almost a tax on turnover. The mortgage interest relief that you're able to claim has been reduced to a point now. And, whereas before it was so much easier to kind of file your own returns, now more and more people are having to enlist the help of an accountant just to get it right, just to make sure that you are, paying the right amount of tax. And I find that a lot of my clients have found themselves in a situation where failing to prepare, they're paying a lot more in tax than they expected to, and sometimes even more than they're actually getting in profit. So you do have to be very careful about how you're going to be purchasing these properties. Obviously, as a result, now people are purchasing through limited companies and limited liability partnerships, but that's not that massively straightforward either. It becomes very important to get the right kind of advice before moving forward.
So you're almost putting me off a little bit, I have to say. So it's not just as straightforward as it seems. It just seems buy a property, let it out, let the renter pay your mortgage effectively. That those days are gone. So I think what you're saying, and I think when I've spoken to you in the past, I think if somebody wants to be a property investor, this is not something they should go into half-hearted.
Absolutely.
This is something fully committed, treat it like a business, fully understand it. But if people have got their mindset right on this, and for sure, property can form an important asset within an overall portfolio. Some people feel it's a bit safer for financial well-being. I think it's fair to say, even though properties have been known to go down, they generally seem a bit more stable than stock market investments, which I think are good for our well-being. Because when we have a COVID-19 epidemic and the market's dropped 30% and we're all worried, the property market probably stagnated a bit, but we haven't seen 30% drops just yet. Who knows what's around the corner, of course. So I think that's a good part of it. But if somebody has got the mindset right, they've got starting to save some money to get together, and they really want to get into the property side of things, what would you say is the most important first step that a serious property investor should do?
Okay. So Darren, I'm going to go one better, and I'm going to give you 3 key steps, I believe, if you are serious about getting into property. The first thing you should do is your research, tons of it. There are all sorts of people that you can speak to about this. There's lots of property forums out there. There are events online. They used to be in person, but obviously the COVID crisis has changed that. But there's lots of online events. There's lots of information on YouTube and the internet about this. So spend your time doing your research. The second thing that's very important is what I call building your power team. And that is having some very good specialists in your corner. And so one of the key specialists I would say is having a mortgage advisor that really understands property and is able to give you specific detail for your circumstances, especially with the differences with financing. The second is a property accountant. That has become more important. There are lots of accountants out there, but not everybody specializes in property. So it's important you find someone who does. And the next person that you probably want to have in there is a good property lawyer, someone who understands commercial property finance. Okay, so those are probably the main key parts. Of obviously there'll be other people like decent plumber and accountant, all of decent plumber and bricklayer and whatever. But those are the key desktop professionals to start off with.
That was a lawyer, an accountant, and
a good broker.
Mortgage broker.
Yes. Okay. And my third bit of advice is don't expect that this is going to happen quickly. You have to spend your time after you've done your research, spoken to your professionals. You then have to find a strategy that works for you, something sustainable that you can put into place long term, and is going to help you to achieve the goals that you want to achieve. So, and this can take a little while. So just expect that it's going to take a bit of time to get started these days. Yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. So I do have quite a few questions. How are we doing for time? We're 26. So I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to wrap this half an hour up now. Thank you very much, Augusta. I have a lot of questions. So if you're happy to hang around for 10, 15 more minutes, those of you that have asked questions, I'm going to try to answer them for you. Those of you that have got to go in the half an hour, just want to let you know, next week, I have another guest next week. It's a specialist in family wealth preservation. And it's really important because, this is the first generation where we might start to see downward mobility for the first time in a long time. We've always had upward mobility, and it's where the next generation might not be as well off as the previous generation. And what that means is the previous generation have got a responsibility to maximize the amount of cash and pensions that they preserve and pass on to their family if they want to. So there are some fantastic ideas in this session for next week, and it's how to maximize the family wealth, how to optimize that to make sure that we keep that in the family. Inheritance tax is a big issue, keep it in the family bloodline, those sort of things. So we'll have that session next week, and that's based on your feedback. If you are going now, please do the feedback questionnaire for us. Let us know what we're doing well, what we're doing wrong, what you like, any constructive criticism, and any suggestions you've got so we can fine tune this and keep this going. As I say, there's no pitching, no selling, there's no proposition or product at the end of this. This is just pure, unadulterated financial content given to you to help you feeling more in control and feel good about your own finances and take control, so feel have a good level of financial well-being. So thanks very much for those that have to go now. For the rest of you, I am going to look at the questions and see what we've got. Okay, so thanks, Augusta, for hanging around. Here we go. Quick question here. What's the best way to start the process to find out what size of mortgage I can get so I know my price range?
Okay, well, a lot of it is subject to affordability. So the first thing to do is to figure out what you can afford. And usually there are affordability calculators online, several lenders offer these kinds of things. But what I usually tend to work on, because after you've deducted living costs and such, usually lenders will work to roughly 4.5 times your gross income. Yeah. And if you're self-employed, you need to get together a document called an SA 302. It's a statement of earnings. You'll need about a 2-year average. So 2-year average of your total income received on your SA 302, 4.5 times your income, that will give you your borrowing capacity. And then, you have to put a deposit on top of that. So depending on which scheme that you're using, if it's just a standard one, let's say it used to be a 10% deposit, now probably calculate it with a 15% deposit, see if you can afford that, or family members who can support you with that. But if it's a help to buy equity loan, then it's a help to buy or shared ownership, then there's probably calculators that can help you with that, or use a broker, use someone who can give you.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Now, I've had quite a few people say, will this webinar be available online afterwards to review it? And yes, it will be. I believe it's on the Foster De Novo YouTube channel. Foster De Novo YouTube channel. If you can't find it there, you'll find it, go through the Foster De Novo Second Sight website, and they'll take you to that channel. So they'll all be on there. It'll be a couple of days. We have to edit it all. And now we've got to the half-hour stage, I do need to do a screen share, because we are even though we're not promoting any product or any service, we are a financial services regulated organisation. So I have to show everybody this caveat at the end. There you go. I'll put that up for a few minutes. Okay, let's get back onto the questions then. Okay, so what are your thoughts on green/renewable buying schemes? Do you know anything about those, Augusta?
I think I'm going to be a bit more specific about what we're talking about when it comes to green and renewable buying schemes. I think one thing I will say is just be very careful. Lenders in the UK are still incredibly conservative. So they like bricks and mortar. They like houses that are just built the traditional way. So all of these kind of new schemes, your flat pack houses from Germany, they are still quite hard to get mortgages on. So that's what I will say.
Okay, brilliant. We have one here from Chris. It says, Augusta, are you buy-to-let stroke commercial only, or do you do residential? So I think he's trying to prospect you there. But that's not what this is about. We're not here to promote ourselves, okay? I mean, Augusta is a business person, entrepreneur in her own right. And if you want to go and try and find her on the internet, you can Google her if you like. But this is not what this session's about. It'll ruin it if this is about us promoting ourselves. We're not. Absolutely not. Bit of PR for us, of course. But okay, what else we got? Okay. Well, right. So here's a question. I don't know if you're better answer this one or not. It may be too recent. It's will mortgage lenders take into account pre-COVID salary when they request 3 months wage slips? Under normal conditions, salaries are higher.
So to some extent they will. The challenge that lenders are having right now is trying to ensure that they are fairly lending based on affordability. So if you have a pro-COVID salary and that salary is, gone down by 20%, that's going to have an impact on your ability to afford that loan. So look, lenders will definitely take a view of the last 3 months and the income that you're receiving. Even though you've been furloughed, as long as you either meet the lender's criteria or affordability stacks up, you'll still be able to get a mortgage, even if you've been furloughed. But if you are trying to borrow money based on your pre-COVID income and you're not receiving that income anymore, then you probably will struggle to get that mortgage over the line.
Thank you. There's a couple of people asked about mortgage terms here. So if I kind of summarize the two questions into one, it's what's your view, Augusta, on long-term mortgages, say 35 years?
Well, again, this is always subject to the individual. And there is a difference as to whether we're talking residential mortgages or buy-to-let mortgages. If you're taking a residential mortgage over the 35-year period, obviously your monthly payment is going to be a bit lower. So if you're on a residential repayment loan, so it's not interest only, it's repayment, the longer the term, technically, the lower your monthly costs are going to be. However, the more you pay in interest over the long term. So there is a bit of a trade-off there. It's subject to age. So you can't turn up age 50 and ask for a 35-year term. Most lenders will want your residential mortgage to complete before your 70th birthday. So you have to be kind of young enough to get a 35-year term. When it comes to interest only, whether the loan is 1 year or 25 years, interest is interest. So it doesn't really make that much impact on interest only loans.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. Okay, here's another topical one. Obviously, there's been a stamp duty holiday offered by the Chancellor.
Yes.
Could you explain, because that's a bit confusing for people, I think. Does it kick in at that $500,000? Does it then get backdated? How does all that work and how long does it last for?
Okay, so I'm not a stamp duty calculator. It's really important that you go and you find one, because that will just give you a simple answer as to how much stamp duty they have to pay on my next purchase. What I will say, it's an amazing opportunity, particularly if you were like already in the process of buying a house, you've been thinking very closely about buying a house right now. Obviously, the idea is for the government to kickstart the economy, which is why it's been put in place. But essentially, from a first-time buyer perspective, you will pay no interest only on property purchase up to £300,000, and then there was a charge for £300,000 and above. And again, it's best to use a calculator to figure out how much that charge would have been. Now, if you buy a property up to £500,000, there's no stamp duty to pay. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity for first-time buyers, but also for investors. How it used to work before is between £0 and £40,000. There was no stamp duty, then charges would apply from £40,000. However, now there is no stamp duty payable at all, even for buy-to-let investors up to £500,000, even though the 3% surcharge, which did exist, still applies to second properties. Yeah. Okay,
brilliant. Thank you. So there's another interesting question. I don't know if you can answer this because it might be deemed as advice. So somebody's talked. This is again. There's a couple of people that mentioned this concept, but they're saying they know it depends on the individual situation. That might be the answer. But if you have 20 or 25% deposit, should you put that all into a property and then get a smaller mortgage, or should you have a smaller deposit and invest that money in something else?
Again, it really does depend on individual circumstances, because a few things come into play that we haven't mentioned, and I don't want to blow your brains with it, but it's not so simple. So if you're thinking about, and again, it depends if you're talking residential or buy-to-let here, okay? If you're talking buy to let, because usually that's what 25% deposits relate to, the lender doesn't say, okay, look, we're just going to give you a 75% loan to value mortgage. They will have a look at the rent of that property, and they will run something called a rental calculation. So if they run that rental calculation, and in fact, it doesn't allow you to get to 75% loan to value, you have to put down a bigger deposit. So it's not that straightforward as in like, oh yeah, here's my 25% deposit. The rent still needs to support that affordability. So it's a much bigger conversation and than we can get into right now.
Okay, thank you. So here's an interesting one. I never thought about this actually. I mean, I actually remember being in a horrible situation many years ago in the 90s called negative equity. I borrowed £50,000 for a property that dropped down to about £35,000, and it stayed there for years and years. I was kind of trapped, you know. So the question that somebody's come up with here, and God forbid this ever happens again, but who knows? It says if you do the government's Help to Buy scheme and you find yourself in negative equity 5 years down the line, do you know how that is treated when you come to sell the property or refinance?
Unfortunately, I don't. I mean, as an advisor, my job really is to understand the finance, to understand the scheme to the extent that, I can help to fill out forms and so on, but I don't really know what the implication would be.
I think that's a really good question, though. I think maybe we should go away and look at that one, actually, and then what I'll do is, if we remember to do that for next week, I'll just introduce that question at the start of next week's and just share the answer with people, because I think that is... now we've got the COVID pandemic and, things seem to be settling down. Still lots we don't know. We still don't know what impact yet this is going to have on the economy, on jobs, on house prices, on stock markets and everything. So, we could be at the beginning of a terrible, terrible long-term recession. Who knows? So to say that, to ignore that question would be daft, I think. So, yes, what we'll do then, Hannah's asked the question. We're going to go away and find out. If you don't find out in the meantime, what we'll do is, if I remember rightly, I've got the marketing team who can pick this up for me and remind me next week. When I start the session, I'll come up with the answer to that. So how does the government treat their loan if the Help to Buy property is in negative equity? That's a good question. Okay, so we've got loads more questions coming in. Okay, so if you're working and a good salary but poor credit history, would you get the money for the mortgage? Is the question.
It depends how poor your credit is. That's the answer. Sometimes people call me up and they're like, my credit's really poor, and I look at it and there's a couple of missed payments 5 years ago. Okay, you're okay. Sometimes people are like, oh, my credit's okay, and then we look at it and there's a CCJ from last week. So credit adversity is very subjective. You have to look at your report or get your advisor to have a look at your report and comment on what's likely. Also, the market is packed with a wide array of lenders. You've got your high street guys on the very far end, Santander. If you've had so much as a missed payment anytime in the last 6 years, forget it, they won't touch you. And then right on the other end, you've got lenders who are more taken to adverse, your Precises, your Bluestones. So there's a wide range of lenders out there. So depending on your circumstances, a good advisor should be able to help you figure out whether you're in a position to borrow or not.
Thank you. Here's a good question from James, actually. It's kind of come a bit left field, but obviously it's in his mind. And it's about, if you're buying a property and you're financing it, should you go for a full structural survey, or should you just go for the basic lender survey? Obviously, the cost is quite different. What's your thoughts on that?
Again, very much dependent on your individual circumstances. Now, from a lender's perspective, they just want to make sure that the property is subject to, is suitable for borrowing purposes. So when they send their valuer out, they just want to make sure that actually it's mortgageable. Now, the issue that you've got is when you go for a full structural survey, the lender's not asking for it. But if something, I don't know if anyone's ever had a full structural survey, but they will pick out absolutely everything, whether it matters or not. And so you might end up opening up a can of worms when you don't necessarily need to. However, if you do have concerns about that property, it might be a good idea in order to just kind of, protect yourself. So I would say generally structural surveys are good for maybe very old freehold properties. However, if you have a flat and, there's a whole bunch of houses in that flat, does it make sense to go for a structural survey? I think the freeholder would know if the whole block was slanting on one side. So again, it just really depends on your circumstances.
Thank you. So I think we've got time for one more question. And again, there's been a number of people asking about the Help to Buy scheme. Obviously, young people on here, desperate to find a way to get onto the property ladder. It's interesting, actually, because I was running a young person's financial forum at an organisation recently. There's quite a few European nationals there, and they have a different culture over there. A lot of them they don't expect to buy a house. It's kind of maybe a British thing. A lot of them just rent forever. So it's strange that we feel the need to do that in the UK. But with the question here is, there's a lot of positives with the Help to Buy scheme. So you need less income because you're borrowing a smaller percentage. You can get by with a smaller deposit. You get the loan from the government for free, no interest. But people are asking, what are the downsides? It seems like all upside. What's the downsides? What are the cons on this?
Of the Help to Buy scheme?
Yeah.
Well, look, you are effectively in a joint venture agreement with the government. You don't fully own this house outright, you're kind of subject to, and if you sell the house for a nice amount of money, you don't get the whole thing. They will benefit in that uplift, Some people see that as a okay thing. It seems okay right now, but I don't know how you're going to feel in 5 years' time when you've got to give them this extra bit of money. It's also harder to use these schemes, to use shared ownership and Help to Buy, than it would be to just use a standard mortgage product. And the reason being is, you have two parties at play here. You have your broker, who their job is to go out there and find the mortgage for you that's going to fit. And then you have either your housing association or the people who are dealing with the Help to Buy, the estate agents or the developers who are dealing with the Help to Buy, and they have their own kind of affordability calculator to make sure that you can afford that property. And what I found in recent years is that there's been this misalignment where, I'll go away and I'll get this mortgage and the lender's totally happy with affordability, and then we'll present this mortgage to the shared ownership scheme or the developer. Actually, it turns out that they're like, well, we don't think it's affordable. And it's like, well, we've got the lender thinks it's okay. Why do you not think it's okay? They tend to be a bit more strict now. So what I do now to avoid this misalignment is, before I even put the mortgage in place, I go and I get the calculator that they're using. And I make sure that whatever loan we're going to put in place is going to be acceptable at the end. And, even when you're doing that, challenges still come up all the time. It's not easy. That's the short answer. That's really the biggest downside.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks. Look, we have run out of time now officially. I want to thank you so much, Augusta. I think we could have kept this going for another hour or so. So one of the things I'm going to ask the audience to do when you do your feedback, if you'd like me to get Augusta back on a future show, let us know. And then what we'll do, we'll email out to you your questions and try to clump together the most popular questions. I know there's a lot of very individual ones here, but thanks very much for jumping on. Really do need your feedback, guys. So thanks very much for jumping on. Tell everybody about these sessions. Give us your feedback. Tell us what you want going forward. And as I say, next week, we're going to be focusing on family wealth preservation, keeping it in the family, keeping that money in the family. There's lots of opportunities there. And I have an excellent guest called David Stockdale, who's one of the most highly qualified people in this area, in the UK market. Very pleasing, pleasant guy, easy to explain things in very plain, simple English. So thanks very much. Those questions that have been asked that haven't been answered, what we'll endeavour to do is to try and pop out some specific answers to you guys. So keep them coming in, and we'll send them over to Augusta. If she can give you a one-line answer or a couple of bits and bobs on that, absolutely fantastic. In the meantime, thanks, Augusta. Really appreciate your help. Thanks for jumping on, everybody. I look forward to seeing you all next Friday, and I'll have be in my proper studio with my nice backdrop rather than my friend's study in Cornwall. You take care. Thanks for jumping on, and I'll see you all next week. Bye, Augusta. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Lovely comments. Thanks for your lovely comments, guys. Brilliant. Take care.